The National Security Minister disappointed by a recent U.S. report on crime in the Bahamas.
So we have an obligation to seek to counteract it in the quickest time possible.
Good evening, Bahamas. This is NB12 broadcasting from Cable 12 Studios on Robinson Road. Also in news tonight, the minister responsible for the public service dismisses claims of victimization. A chat with some of the contenders for F&M deputy leader and chairman, plus Wendy's promoting the fight against human trafficking. Those stories and so much more on the way. I'm Nikia DeVoe and NB12 starts right now. Thanks again for joining us here at NB12. While Bahamians have been living with the escalation of crime in the country, the United States seems to be growing more concerned about it. Our powerful northern neighbors recently increased the threat level of crime in the country, particularly against tourists. And as our Paige McCartney tells us in this report, the government is disappointed by this new development.
The United States State Department recently upgraded the country's crime problem from high to critical. And according to Minister of National Security, Dr. Nottage, there's cause for great concern that the country's crime problem is now being broadcast to the entire world. While Bahamians have played witness to the increasing violence plaguing the country over the past 2 or so years, it is being increasingly highlighted by international bodies. Minister of National Security, Dr. Nottage, said the government will implement what it believes is a dynamic approach to stem the crime problem it inherited as soon as possible. Meantime, the United States State Department is highlighting a 35% increase in murders in just 1 year and commenting that common daily activities can directly impact personal security.
We are concerned, whether it's broadcast around the world or not, we are the victims of it, and it's being perpetrated upon us by members of our own communities. So we have an obligation to seek to counteract it in the quickest time possible and most as effectively as possible. So the fact that it has reached elsewhere in the world is just a consequence. But we are victims, we are daily victims. I know that people of our communities are living in fear of crime. And so, you know, people like to put the emphasis on what happens to tourists when they come here, but, you know, there are a whole lot of things that happen to our own citizens.
Nottage said how the crime wave affects the country's bottom line is also of great concern. The U.S. report said that crime adversely affected the traveling public, with armed robberies, property theft, purse snatchings, and assaults being the most common crimes against tourists. The report also points out that these crimes do not happen in residential areas, but in tourist locations like Prince George Wharf, Cable Beach, and downtown areas, even at casinos, outside hotels, and on cruise ships.
I think that's primarily because, generally speaking, when tourists go in the over-the-hill areas, they're accommodated by taxi drivers and other people like that, and so they're less likely to be victims than when they're traveling on their own without local persons with them. As you know, the government developed a strategy to have CCTV cameras in those tourist-related areas.
The United States State Department is of the view that cash for gold businesses that have recently come about are the main reason behind the spike in violent crimes and armed robberies.
I've heard that, and I've heard it expressed locally by local agents and by the former government, and that may be the case. If it is the case, then we would have to develop a strategy to counteract it.
Does that surprise you at all?
Not really, because, you know, I've personally witnessed young men snatching gold chains from around people's neck, and I know a number of people who have been victims of that kind of crime, and clearly it's being done to get money, and so no, it doesn't surprise me.
During the Ingram administration, at least 3 death warrants were prepared to be read to prisoners on death row at Her Majesty's prison. However, no executions took place. Nottage said capital punishment has not been recently discussed by the new Christie cabinet, but he will carry through with the law.
It's the law, and as Minister of National Security, I will carry out the law.
To address the crime problem, the government proposes to implement Urban Renewal 2.0, school policing, and appoint a special committee to discuss crime strategies. Reporting for NB12, I'm Paige McCartney.
An international research firm has suggested that the progressive liberal party's Believe in the Bahamas resonated with voters and contributed to its victory at the polls. However, some critics have suggested that the slogan does not reflect the actions of the government, which recently canceled the contracts of two well-known Bahamians. Vonnie Toot reports.
At least two people have come forward in recent days claiming that the new Progressive Liberal Party government abruptly terminated their contracts. However, the minister responsible for the public service defended the government today. Shane Gibson says the PLP is not about victimization. Chrissy Love, who is the former host of ZNS radio talk show Immediate Response, received a termination letter on Monday, 2 months before her contract was due to expire. Then on Wednesday, consultant in the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources and Local Government, John Lee Ferguson, was informed that his services were no longer needed, 10 months before his contract was up. Labor Minister Shane Gibson told NB12 that neither of those cases classify as victimization.
John Lee Ferguson was a frontline politician, I believe. My understanding from the information I have is he got his position because of politics. It wasn't that they needed a consultant. My understanding is that they needed to find something for him to do, and they gave him something to do. And so, in accordance with his contract, the contract was terminated. And so, my understanding is that he should have terminated. He should have actually resigned after the election, like the other political appointees, which he didn't do. Now, in terms of Chrissy Love, I heard Chrissy Love myself on the radio pleading, saying how she want to go and buy a fridge and a stove and a new house and all this stuff.
Gibson called the names of 3 people whom he alleges were fired by the F&M government following the 2007 general election. The Ingram administration canceled the contracts of former Immediate Response host Steve McKinney and Drive Time host Philippa Lady Russell shortly after taking office. Gibson says these things can happen when you sign contracts.
If you don't agree with the terms and conditions of the contract, then don't sign it. You know, I signed a contract with the Bahamian people. After 5 years, if they decide to vote me out, I shouldn't be complaining and making people believe that I'm the only person capable of running the country, right? I can't get upset if after 5 years they vote me out of office. You know, the only thing I can do is do my best. Whichever agreement I sign, then I have to be willing to live and abide by the agreement at the end of the day. And so, it's unfortunate what happened to John Lee. You know, I mean, he's a good person. I know him personally, he's my family. But he signed the contract. If he hadn't agreed with it, he shouldn't have signed it.
The F&M claims that the PLP has quickly returned to its old ways. The opposition recently said Chrissy Love's termination clearly indicates the PLP neither cares for or believes in Bahamians, like its campaign slogan suggested. Gibson says he is unaware of any other contracts being terminated before they were up and has not seen any instances of victimization since the PLP came to office.
The PLP is not about victimizing people. They're not about victimizing people, not at all. I mean, every ministry you have to expect changes. People vote for a change. You don't vote to have the same thing in place. All right, you vote because you want to change. And so from time to time, persons will be transferred in the public service. It happens all the time, even when it's not an election cycle. And so you may hear a person's being moved from one ministry to the next, but that's normal. You know, and some people will say victimization, but the point is, Bahamians voted for a change. And so you will see changes from time to time.
Gibson insists that the government is trying to build up the public service, not tear it down. In fact, he says they're currently working on public service reform to make the public sector more efficient. Reporting for NB12, I'm Vonnie Toot.
Parliament will open for a new session under a new administration on May 23rd. There will be some familiar faces and a number of new ones. But as Christina McNeil tells us in this next report, there's a lot of planning and preparation that goes on behind the scenes in the run-up to the big event.
In less than a week, Parliament Square will be transformed as parliamentarians, senators, and other dignitaries assemble for the opening of Parliament and the reading of the speech from the throne.
A high level of pomp and pageantry is expected at the opening of Parliament next week, but according to Chief Clerk of the House of Assembly Maurice Tynes, there's still a lot of work to be done before then. Tynes is responsible for ensuring that everything is in order for the grand-scale opening.
primary challenge right now is getting the renovations that are being done completed in time so we can get the House of Assembly put back together. Following that, we have a number of other challenges, getting the programs ready for the opening, getting the reconfiguration of the House of Assembly for the reduced numbers of members of Parliament.
Preparation for the new session and the opening of Parliament began shortly after the dissolution of Parliament on April 10th. Since then, parts of the wooden floor in the lower house have been replaced. Tyne says he is confident the work will be complete in time for the opening of Parliament.
And we have to make sure the members are here and make sure they know what happens. I have to get prepared to whomever is elected speaker, to make sure that the speaker knows what to do.
Government officials and protocol officers held a meeting today as part of the final preparations. With more than 1,200 Bahamians expected to attend the opening, Assistant Commissioner of Police Leon Bethel says police have a plan in place to secure the area. Traffic is being handled by Superintendent Ken Strawn, who explains changes along Bay Street.
We're into our final stage now in terms of providing security for the opening. We have briefed all of our commanders so that everyone could be involved in this in the security of the opening of Parliament. This is the seat of government, and we must perform to the highest level.
It is expected that during the preparations, Bay Street will be closed off from the area of Charlotte Street, eastbound to East Street, and parking will be prohibited as of 3 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon on both the north and south side of Bay Street, as well as Rawson Square, Parliament Street. In addition, as of 6 a.m. on Wednesday morning, the day of the event, there will be no vehicular traffic permitted on Bay Street from Charlotte Street. As a matter of fact, from Frederick Street all the way east to East Street.
Motorists will be directed north from Bay Street onto Marlborough or Frederick Streets around to East Street if they wish to continue heading east. Parking for parliamentarians, senators, and dignitaries will be at the rear of the Churchill building, while members of the public are being asked to park at Botanical Gardens, where transportation will be provided to Bay Street by the Royal Bahamas Defence Force. Strawn says vehicles parked in designated no parking areas will be towed. Reporting for NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.